What is a tariff, and why has it caused wars for 2,000 years? 2,000 years ago, Roman soldiers stood at the edges of their empire, stopping every merchant who tried to pass through. "You can come through," they said, "but first, pay up." They called it a tax on goods. Today, in 2026, the same idea is causing trade disputes on every continent, between the US and China, between Europe and China, between countries that traded freely for decades. Dozens of governments are rethinking their trade rules at the same time. It's called a tariff. And today we're going to find out what is it, where did it come from, and why did it have some of the smart economists in history called it a terrible idea, while others said it's absolutely necessary. What is a tariff? A tariff is a tax that a government charges on goods coming into a country from another country. Here's a real example. China builds electric cars, brands like BYD, and they're much cheaper than cars made in Europe. A Chinese electric car might cost $20,000. A similar one made in Germany might cost $40,000. If Chinese cars flood into Europe freely, European car factories could lose customers and shut down. So in 2024, the European Union said Chinese electric cars can still come in, but we're adding a tariff of up to 45%. That made the $20,000 Chinese car cost closer to $29,000 in Europe. European cars suddenly looked competitive again. You might be thinking, okay, so China paid the tariff and that's it. Not quite. Here's the sneaky part. The Chinese car company doesn't just absorb that extra cost. They add it into their price. The shipping company adds a bit more. The European dealer adds a bit more. And by the time the car reaches the showroom, the person holding the bill is you, the customer. That's the part most people don't realize. The tax is collected at the border, but the cost travels all the way to the end of the line, the person buying the product. That's called passing the cost onto the consumer, the person who buys and uses the product. 2,000 years of tariff history. So, who invented tariffs? Basically, everyone, at different times throughout history. Ancient Greeks charged merchants to use their ports. Roman soldiers collected border taxes across Europe and North Africa. Chinese emperors taxed merchants along the Silk Road, the ancient trade route connecting China to the Middle East and Europe. For thousands of years, tariffs were mostly just a way for rulers to raise money. But in the 1800s, tariffs became something bigger and more controversial. In 1875, the British government passed a law called the Corn Laws, a massive tariff on imported grain. The idea was to protect British farmers. If a foreign grain was expensive, people would buy British grain instead. But bread is made from grain, and when grain became expensive, bread became expensive too. For poor families, bread wasn't just a side dish. It was often the only thing they could afford to eat. Suddenly, they couldn't. People marched in the streets. They smashed windows. For 31 years, the government refused to back down. Finally, in 1846, the Corn Laws were repealed, not because the government wanted to, but because the pressure from ordinary people became impossible to ignore. It was one of the first great battles between two ideas that are still fighting today: protect our own people versus let trade flow freely. Fast forward to 1930. The U.S. economy was already struggling after a stock market crash. Congress raised tariffs on over 20,000 imported products to protect American workers. What actually happened? Every other country retaliated. They raised their own tariffs on American goods. International trade collapsed. U.S. exports fell by more than 60%. Factories closed. More people lost their jobs. Most economists believe this Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act made the Great Depression significantly worse. The lesson? When countries start a tariff war, everybody loses. After World War II, world leaders decided we need rules. In 1947, 23 countries signed the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or GATT. They agreed to lower their tariffs together step by step. Over the decades, more countries joined. Tariffs came down, trade grew. In 1955, GATT became the World Trade Organization, the WTO, with 164 member countries all committed to the shared rules. For almost 50 years, it mostly worked. Then in 2025 and 2026, the U.S. announced major new tariffs on China, on Canada, on dozens of countries. The rules that had held for decades start to crack. There are 3 reasons countries still use tariffs. Reason 1, protect local workers and industries. Imagine China makes cheap electric cars. If they flood into Europe freely, German car factories could shut down and workers lose their jobs. A tariff makes the Chinese cars cost more, so European cars look competitive again. But here's the tension. When countries each do what they're best at, everyone pays less. A tariff goes against that logic, and nobody can agree on how high it should be. Too low, and it doesn't protect jobs. Too high, and everybody pays too much. There's no magic number. This is why the debate never ends. Reason 2, raise money for the government. Every tariff collected at the border goes into the government's account. This money helps pay for customs officers at every port and airport. It also goes towards hospitals, schools, and roads, services that governments around the world provide to their citizens. Reason 3, a bargaining chip. Countries can't take each other to court the way individuals can. There's no world police. So how does one country change another's behavior? By making it painful. Country A puts a tariff on country B's steel. Country B retaliates with a tariff on country's A orange juice. Country A's farmers start losing their money. They pressured their government. Suddenly, both sides are willing to talk. Tariffs give countries economic leverage, a way to apply pressure without going to war. The big debate. Has anyone ever won this argument? So, are tariffs good or bad? The honest answer? Some of the smartest people in history have been arguing about this since 1776. In that year, a Scottish economist named Adam Smith wrote a famous book called The Wealth of Nations. His argument? Free trade and benefits for everyone. When a country lowers tariffs and trade freely, they all end up richer. Tariffs just make things more expensive for ordinary people in order to protect a few. A generation later, David Ricardo added the theory of comparative advantage. Every country should specialize in what it's relatively best at and trade for the rest. Germany makes cars, Bangladesh makes clothes, both win. But the other side has real points too. Some industries are too important to let disappear, like steel, medicine, or food. What if a country becomes completely dependent on another country for something it can't survive without? And workers who lose their jobs don't just quietly find new ones, they struggle. Their families struggle. Their communities struggle. Telling them, but the overall economy is better off, doesn't pay the rent. So the debate continues, and right now it's playing out in real time, all over the world. The US, Europe, and China, and dozens of countries are all rethinking their trade rules at the same time. Nobody knows how it exactly ends. Over the next few episodes, we're going to zoom in on one part of the story and follow exactly what happens when countries start a tariff war step by step. But first, how did the world get so connected that one country's tariffs can affect the price of your hoodie? Next episode, we'll follow a hoodie from a cotton field all the way to your closet and find out how globalization really works. See you now that you know what a tariff is and why it's always been so controversial. Do you think tariffs are a good or bad idea? Tell me in the comments and give me your reason.